Hello, everyone. How are you feeling tonight or today, wherever you are joining from? Welcome to our compassionate weekly accountability meeting. If you are new here, I am Karina Ivar Jacobs, psychotherapist and coach specializing in parentification and complex trauma. And I created this space to support you in healing, setting boundaries, and reclaiming your self worth. And whether you are watching live or catching the replay, I want you to know that you are safe and welcomed here. And tonight, we are diving into something that affects a lot of us, our trauma responses. You have probably heard of fight or flight, but did you know that there are four main trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn? And these responses are deeply explored by psychotherapist and author of the book Complex Trauma From Surviving to Thriving, Pete Walker. And it is a must read for anyone healing from childhood trauma. And let me know where you are joining from in the comments. I would love to say hello. If you are a Self-Worth Hub member, don't forget that you can track the attendance here for a chance to win a monthly gift card to reward our most active members. So it would be wonderful to see you. Say hello, whoever you are. If you're just stopping by, if you're a subscriber, if you are a Self Worth Hub member, welcome. Cannot wait to see you in the comments, ask any questions, and interact with you. Okay? Now, these trauma responses are not personality flaws or signs of weakness. They are deeply ingrained in survival mechanisms that were formed in response to past experiences. So, the good news is that they can be unlearned, and you are not broken. You're not in need of fixing. Healing is absolutely possible. Okay, so first, I would like to talk about the root causes of the 4F trauma responses. And before we talk about how these responses show up in daily life, I would like to give you examples. Let's take a step back and explore where they come from, right? Trauma responses begin in childhood. When we are young, our brains are highly adaptable, right? We're so malleable as children. So we learn what's safe and what isn't based on how our caregivers, caretakers, our parents respond to us. So let's say that we grow up in an environment where love, safety, and emotional security are inconsistent, or worse, where there is neglect, abuse, or emotional invalidation, then our nervous system develops protective mechanisms to help us survive. So, if fighting back helped us feel safer, then we develop a fight response. And if escaping or avoiding helped us cope, then we develop a flight response. Like maybe we just want to distract ourselves because we cannot comprehend how these stressful situations, all these conflicts, this lack of stability and lack of safety within our household is true. So we cope by just avoiding, right? And let's say that shutting down or disconnecting kept you safe, then you would likely develop a freeze response. And then, if pleasing others was the best way to avoid harm, then we develop a fawn response, which means people pleasing, just trying to soothe people and avoid conflict. So, over time, these responses become automatic, basically. So, even as adults, and this can show up in any field, like in any areas of our lives. It could be predominantly in romantic relationships, but it can show in familial relationships, even at work. You may get easily defensive, if you get the slight criticism, or you may appease everyone and try to be the fixer and just people pleasing in order to avoid being criticized, just to give you some examples, right? So our nervous system doesn't always recognize the difference between past danger and present safety. So we continue reacting in ways that no longer serve us, often feeling stuck, anxious, or disconnected. And I want to pause for a second and reflect, which of these responses do you recognize in yourself, right? So let me know in the comments. And I want to ask you, when do they tend to show up the most? Drop it in the comments if you feel comfortable. Okay. Which of these responses do you recognize yourself in? Drop it in the comments if you feel safe to do so. Right. So, and thanks for sharing in advance. I will be on the lookout. So now let's go a little bit deeper into each response and talk about how they show up in daily life. And more importantly, how we can begin to heal. Right? So let's understand the four trauma responses with some relatable examples. Right? So these responses show up in our thoughts, our emotions, and behaviors. You might have one dominant response, or you might switch between them depending on the situation, maybe two. So let's break each of them down. So let's begin with the fight response, right? Anger control and defensiveness. The fight response develops when a child feels the need to protect themselves through power and control. So it often comes from an environment where they felt attacked, criticized, or powerless. And as adults, this might look like becoming easily irritated or aggressive when feeling threatened and struggling with authority or criticism. So you feel the need to control situations or people using anger as a defense mechanism to avoid feeling vulnerable. And an example that I can give you is to think about someone who always has to be right in an argument or reacts with intense defensiveness. Then their nervous system learned that standing their ground was the only way to feel safe. And it's like avoid the imperfect others, I'm right. Right. And I want to offer you some strategies to heal the anger, the fight response. Right. And I know this is easier said than done, but it is possible once we become aware of what's happening. And what I would encourage you to do is to practice self soothing techniques like deep breathing before reacting. Challenge the belief that being vulnerable equals being weak, and learn to express anger in healthy ways like journaling, movement, or therapy. Right. So, for example, if you know that you are likely to respond with defensiveness, perhaps just pause and say, you know what? I need a moment. Like literally, I need a moment. I'll get back to you. This is really frustrating me. Let's get back to this, right? That could be a way where you can verbalize that you're frustrated, but you're not lashing out at someone else and potentially offending them to the point that then there's a lot of damage repairing to be done, right? We want to avoid that because if you have a fight response, you can hurt people that you love dearly. And this is a trauma response. So just a humble suggestion to pause. If you know that you're going to walk into easily triggering circumstances, situations, then make sure that you ground yourself by doing some breath work, tap yourself, and remember that you have the ability to respond response. You have response ability. Okay. This is within your control, and it takes one interaction at a time. And now on to the flight response. And this is where we witness perfectionism and avoidance. The flight response develops when a child learns that escaping physically or mentally is the safest option. And I have to say, a lot of my clients and members are flight responses, either flight and fawn or flight and fight. I'm sorry. Yeah, flight and fight. Okay. But it can vacillate between each of them. Like some of them may be flight response when it comes to everyone else, but when it comes to romantic partners, it may be a fawn, more of a people pleaser. And you get the point. Like we may switch. And with the flight response, it often comes from environments where perfection was expected or where mistakes led to punishment or shame. And as adults, it might look like overworking, perfectionism, or constantly staying busy, avoiding confrontation, or emotionally shutting down in relationships while feeling restless, anxious, or like you can never do enough or you cannot stop, right? It's so hard to relax. So you just do a lot of busyism. And an example that I can give you is, do you ever find yourself binge watching, I don't know, a show, Netflix, or staying busy just to avoid thinking about something painful? That's a flight response kicking in. Or it could be that, there is a lot going on with your family, and instead of addressing what's going on as a coping mechanism, then you just focus on overworking. So that's a simple example that I can give you. However, it's more complex than this. And a healing strategy for the flight response that I can offer you is to slow down and ask yourself, what am I running from? Again, what am I running from? If you are so used to flight in an argument or during conflicts and difficult circumstances, I want you to like literally hold on to whatever is available, like hold on so that you can slow down and not immediately flight. I want you to give yourself permission to rest without guilt also. Use grounding techniques like mindfulness or movement to help you stay present, because it is so easy to distract yourself and avoid the wounds that need to be healed and that need to surface for us to move forward as a flight response. All right. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if you can relate to this. Let's see. I see a few of you watching. So let me know if you can relate to any of these responses so far. Okay. And now on to the freeze response, where you shut down and there is numbness and what we call the couch potato, right? The freeze response develops when a child feels completely overwhelmed and powerless. It often comes from experiences of severe neglect, ongoing trauma, or emotional invalidation. And as adults, it might look like procrastination or feeling stuck in life. There may be emotional numbness, dissociation, or zoning out frequently, and difficulty making decisions or feeling paralyzed by fear, right? Fear of making a mistake, fear of the world. And an example that I can give you is, if you have ever been in a situation where you just freeze up and you cannot find the words to respond, That's freeze in action. Like some people actually, um, they just freeze and they are at a loss for words. And that may be your trauma response. And a strategy that I can give you if you are a freeze response. And again, I want to check in the comments. Don't be shy. Let me know where you are joining from and what trauma response you can resonate if you feel safe, of course, right? So, back to the freeze response. I would humbly encourage you to gently re engage with the present moment. Try stretching, holding an ice cube, or engaging your senses because we dissociate, just like with the flight response, we dissociate, but in a different way. We become numb and paralyzed because things feel so overwhelming. That's why I would encourage you to, you know, hold an ice cube, maybe wash your face with cold water, splash your face. And in terms of tasks, do not think of them as this big cloud, right? So nebular, like I have to do this, otherwise, um, I'm going to lose my job or I'm going to do terrible. No, let's break tasks into tiny, manageable steps to avoid overwhelm. Because with the freeze response and any response for that matter, building self trust is so important. So remind yourself, I can handle this one step at a time, one step at a time. And the more that you do, the more that you can look back and surprise yourself. Many of my clients surprise themselves because at first they catastrophize and they think about, oh my gosh, they overgeneralize, I cannot do this, or like this is going to be so overwhelming to do. But then they surprise themselves when they get organized and realize, like, well, if I don't show up for myself, then who will? So it's important to have your own back in this process. And that this applies to anyone for any of the responses. This applies to you. A sure way to build self confidence and self trust is to show up for yourself. Have integrity of your own commitments and word and show up for yourself. Okay. And on to the Fawn response, people pleasing and self abandonment. Oh, this is so common. And I used to be a Fawn response, a flight and Fawn. And it will show up predominantly in intimate relationships where there will be self abandonment. I could drop anything that I would be doing, any of my commitments, if you needed anything. If I need to show up for others, then I would just drop everything, especially for people that I care about, my family. And it is also when a child learns that pleasing others is the safest way to avoid harm and also to get attention. So it often comes from emotionally immature caregivers who made love feel conditional or they were not available. So as adults, it might look like saying yes when you mean no and feeling extremely responsible for other people's emotions, and avoiding conflict at all costs, or struggling with setting boundaries and enforcing them. And you may try to set boundaries, but then people take advantage of you because you can overextend yourself in relationships. Does that resonate? If that does, please comment I. I see some of you watching, so I would love to hear from you. If it feels comfortable, let me know what resonates so far. And an example that I can give you is if you apologize when you weren't at fault. And for instance, I used to say sorry just for existing sometimes, and nobody would think this way because I present very confident, right? I can be confident in person, I can be very hands on. However, however, this need to be liked and to, come off, perfect, even though I didn't recognize it before I did my healing and growth work. It's so common. It's so common. And sometimes you take more than you should. And to avoid conflict or just to not feel that anxiety, you may admit fault to situations that, it wasn't your fault, just to keep the peace. Does that resonate? So that is Fawn taking over, right? Overriding your own needs sometimes. And some strategies to heal the Fawn response is to pause before saying yes and ask yourself, am I doing this out of fear or genuine care? Am I doing this out of fear or genuine care? You can also ask yourself, when I say yes to this or this person, am I saying no to a part of who I am? So please write that down if you resonate with the people pleasing and fawn response. And I want you to practice micro boundaries. Start small and work your way up. Remind yourself, my needs matter too. Okay? Remember that the more you show up authentically and recognize your boundaries, and maybe something that you can practice is verbiage is, let me get back to you on that. To practice boundaries, don't just say yes immediately. Okay? Even if you have nothing going on, just say, I see. Actually, let me see. I would love to help, but let me get back to you on that. Just baby steps. Practice one micro boundary at a time. And if you resonate with this, I will actually link in the description after this live my guide to setting boundaries so that you can have scripts, and it's a completely free mini course and template so that you can practice setting boundaries without feeling guilty. Because when you think about it, each of these responses are fear based. No matter whether you are a fight, flight, fawn, or you freeze, the underlying feeling is fear. It is a coping mechanism to keep you safe. Okay. And if any of these responses resonated with you, I want you to hear this. These patterns were your survival strategies, and they're not personality traits. You have the power to unlearn them. Okay. So I want you to drop a comment and tell me what's one thing that you are taking away from tonight's conversation. Okay. Let's see. Anyone? Don't be shy. Let me check the comments. And I understand some Sundays are more active than others. You may be, processing, and that's okay. But I would love to hear from you. Let me know, what can you take from tonight's conversation? Any questions that you may ask before we close, right? So let me know. And if this helped you, please share it with someone who needs it, because healing is possible. Hello, hello. I see a comment. Hello, the only to pause before saying yes. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. Absolutely. We can automatically just say yes or like, okay. And then we're like, and we build resentment. So don't forget that in order to build authentic relationships, we want to be authentic. And that means, I'm not saying that you're not being authentic, but without intending to, you may default to saying yes only to resent the person. So keep that in mind, that it's important to speak from the heart, set boundaries, and people will respect you more and are less likely to cross your boundaries. Keep that in mind, because sometimes we want to avoid conflict, but we make it worse because we continue to build resentment and feeling taken advantage of. So thank you for sharing. I hope to see you all next Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our weekly accountability live streams, any of our videos. I release videos every day and every week, a long form. So I hope to see you here. If you have any questions, if you are a Self Worth Hub member, don't forget to track your attendance in our app for a chance to win our monthly gift card. Again, to reward the most active member in our community and your commitment to your well being. So I want to send you all much love and please remember your resilience. Take care, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here. And let me know in the comments before I go anything that you take away, anything that you're going to do for yourself. Let's see. Well, that concludes our live stream. If you came in late, if you're watching, the replay, share it with someone who may need it. Okay? Remember your resilience. Much love, everyone. Bye bye.